everyone, I'm Sam.
And I'm Kaitlyn.
And this is Team Get Ovary It.
We're an all-female team participating in the greatest motoring adventure on the planet,
the Mongol Rally.
We'll be driving 10,000 miles across mountains, deserts, and unknown terrain.
And along the way, we hope to spread our feminist and environmental ideals.
Join us here as we share our stories, thoughts, and interviews as we get ready for the Mongol Rally 2021.
Good day!
Welcome back!
Today we want to talk about something that has been a problem for a long time on our planet Earth, and that is plastic.
Yes, a little while ago we published an essay about plastic pollution and recycling on our blog, but we feel that this is such an important topic that we should cover it here as well.
Yeah, so there have been a lot of, I think, myths, misconceptions, and just straight up misinformation surrounding plastic, and especially the way we dispose of it. I know for me, especially growing up learning about the 3 R's, I've definitely been guilty of thinking that plastic isn't a problem as long as I recycle it.
Yeah, same here. But now we know that it's simply not the case. Personally, I was first turned on to this problem circa 2018 when a lot of countries were freaking out about their trash. Because before that, I thought everything was fine and dandy.
Yeah, and I think we've all heard about the garbage island in the Pacific Ocean, soda can rings around birds' throats and straws up sea turtles' nose. When you really think about it, it seems kind of obvious that there is something seriously wrong with the way that we're dealing with our waste.
That's so true. But for some reason, I always felt like I was doing good by putting my plastic waste into a blue bag instead of a black bag. You know, black bag for trash, blue bag for recycling. But really, the amount of waste doesn't change. It's just a different receptacle. So the way that we process recycling is nowhere near as perfect as most people believe.
Mm-hmm. And so since this episode is based off of a blog post that Kaitlyn wrote, let's hop into some stats. The U.S. represents just 4% of the world population, but it produces 12% of global municipal solid waste. I'm going to just repeat that again. The U.S. Is 4% of the world population, but we produce 12% of global waste. That's insane.
Yeah, it's like 3 times the amount per person. Yikes.
Yeah, and not only that, but the U.S. is terrible at recycling. Only about 35% of the waste that the country produces is recycled, and only about 13% of that recycled waste is plastic.
Yikes. Yeah, and that's especially horrible since the U.S. is supposed to have some of the best recycling facilities in the world. But Americans tend to care more about profits than they do about the environment, and especially under the Trump administration. Hopefully, Biden now can turn it around, fingers crossed. And so Biden has an aggressive climate plan with the goal of having 100% renewable energy by 2050. And one of the first things he did upon taking office was re-entering into the Paris Agreement. So hopefully now we'll see some actual progress towards a greener future.
I think things are definitely moving in sort of a hopeful direction. But I mean, the ramifications of the Trump administration will be felt for years to come. Until about 2018, most of the recyclables amassed in Western countries were sent to developing countries, particularly those in Asia and China. But China stopped accepting trash, and other countries soon followed suit.
Right. So countries like the US, Canada, Belgium, the UK, Germany, and the Netherlands, and France had been sending their waste to Southeast Asia, much to those countries' dismay. The waste was often labeled as recycling, but most of it was contaminated with God only knows what. It could be anything, like other trash, could be grease, could be human waste, honestly. So some countries pushed back by sending their stinking containers back to where they came from.
Fair.
Yeah, totally. When I was reading about this, I read some stories about the countries just refusing to accept trash or sending it back, and I was rooting for them the whole time. I was like, yeah, you put it to those people.
Yeah, especially considering that, I mean, I think there's a greater discussion now about how to recycle properly, right? In terms of making sure that things are cleaned, things with grease can't be recycled. You have to wash plastic containers before it's recycled. But I'm just imagining what the state of the quote unquote recycling that was sent to these countries were, and no one wants that. Send it back.
Yeah, and I think a long time ago I was reading an article just speaking about that because especially for Americans, because it used to be, and even just keeping things separated. But I think what was happening was that, like in America especially, people were having difficulty separating their garbage or their recycling, sorry, by type.
Mm.
And the government tried to simplify it by just having them put their recycling all in one container. But then that also meant a lot of trash was being thrown in one container, right? Because just like the mindset of separating everything was just out. So just everything just went into one place. So man, you would have like dirty diapers in there. You would have like food waste in there, like in mixed in with the recyclings. So it really didn't pan out very well in the end.
Yeah, and well, I think I don't know how it is in Canada, but I
Mhm.
know in the United States, it's like each recycling district has different rules too.
Mm.
And so if you get used to the recycling in one place and move somewhere else, what you previously were able to recycle, you can't in the other place. And so it gets so confusing. I know just recently my mom was on the phone with our waste management asking
Mhm.
like, "Well, what about this? Can this be recycled?" And it
Oh,
was just
yeah.
like you just have to call because otherwise you have no clue what actually can be recycled and it's that's just like adds to the problem, right? Like the confusion about recycling and then not disposing it properly. And then also just
Mhm.
like a lot of these things that we put in recycling cans actually don't get recycled, which we'll get into.
Oh, yeah. That's ugh. It's shocking, honestly.
Yeah, okay. So back to, I guess, what we were talking about. Early in 2019, the Philippines shipped 69 containers of mislabeled trash back to Canada after 5 years of disputes. Unfortunately, not all countries could do that, and they ended up either burning the waste or dumping it into unregulated landfills. The result of improper disposal being the release of toxic fumes as the waste slowly decays and elevated levels of heavy metals seeping into groundwater.
Yeah, so not only is it bad for the well, I mean, it's bad for the environment, but it's also, like, just poisoning humans,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, we're just, like, hurting ourselves by doing this. Yikes. So in 2018, the US reportedly exported 1.7 million tons of waste to Asian countries, most of whom have worse processing and recycling capabilities than the US. Something they do have that the US doesn't is loose waste management standards. So you know that most of that garbage is just going to end up poisoning people, animals, and the earth for the sake of what? Honestly, what convenience? It's convenient for Americans, so it's okay.
Yeah, and that's what it really boils down to, right? Like the excessive use of plastic, for the most part, is a convenience problem.
Yeah.
So that's one problem, and a big one for sure. But there are a lot of other problems with recycling as well. Not all materials are equally recyclable. Take aluminum, for example. This material is 100% recyclable and doesn't lose any quality when it's processed to be used for something else. Plastic, on the other hand, can only be recycled 7 to 9 times before it degrades so much that it's useless.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, whenever I hear things like this or I'm reading stuff like this, I'm just like, why do we even use plastic?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, because it's cheap, it's convenient, but it's honestly terrible. So, and even though aluminum is easily recycled, the recycling rate of all aluminum goods for 2015 was only about 36%. So, 2.4 million tons of aluminum still ended up in landfills. Plastic is even worse. You look at the little numbers on the recycling symbol and think that it means that it's all good. So you huck it into the blue bin and dust your hands off, smiling because you've just assuaged some of your consumers' guilt. Well, those numbers mean something, right? Not all plastic is the same. Care to explain, Sam?
With pleasure. For those of our listeners who don't already know, the number in the little recycling symbol on plastic stuff indicates the type of plastic it is and how recyclable it is. Number one, PET or PETE, and number two, HDPE, are generally accepted everywhere as recyclables, but whether numbers 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7 are recyclable vary from state to state. Something that was perfectly recyclable in your hometown may not be recyclable if you move states for university or for a job or something, which is sort of what we were talking about earlier, right?
Yeah, with your mom calling and stuff. Yeah. And I mean, it's the same, and it is the same in Canada. It's the exact same thing in Canada. Some things are recyclable in some provinces where they're not recyclable in others. So, like for example, glass, which is we know highly recyclable, wasn't accepted for curbside recycling in the city where I used to live in Canada. For like I don't even know why. I guess I guess it had a reason, or like the province had a reason, but I never found out what that reason was. So in my hometown where I grew up, like went to elementary school and high school at, glass was recyclable. Actually, for the longest time, we only had glass bottles. We didn't have plastic bottles or even like aluminum cans because we couldn't recycle the plastic or the aluminum, but we could recycle the glass. So everything was just in glass. It's changed now. Now we have like plastic and aluminum. So when I moved for university to a different province, I was just naturally recycling my glass stuff. So I'd put it
Mm.
like in the blue bag instead of in the trash. But one day, well, when I did that the first time, I got a note on my bag. It didn't get picked up, and the how do we say it? Sanitation worker put a note on it saying like, "Oh, we couldn't pick this up because it contains glass." And I was like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, what?" I was so shocked. Yeah. So, and there's also a lot of other problems with recycling, including contamination.
Yeah. So even if you follow all the rules, use the right bins, use the right bags, recycle stuff that your town or city can process, there's still no guarantee it'll get recycled. Your stuff has to be squeaky clean, separated, and otherwise not contaminated with other materials. For example, you get a cheese sandwich for lunch, which you buy at a quote unquote green deli or an eco friendly deli. The sandwich comes in a little paper box for recycling. But it actually won't be accepted for recycling because the cheese grease has seeped into the paper of the box. You have to throw it in the trash.
Yeah, and I've heard a lot of debate about pizza boxes too, if they can be recycled or not. So the long answer is yes, you can recycle pizza boxes, but the short answer is no, because of the grease and bits of food waste. So a recycling plant in Corner Brook. So this is my hometown. In Newfoundland and Labrador in Canada, was suffering from a high turnover rate of its staff because of how nasty the job is. So basically, their job is they kind of collect all of the recycling that people put out, and they should sort through it. And I think actually maybe not in Newfoundland, because like in Newfoundland, recycling is like curbside recycling anyway is kind of a new concept. I think they started recycling when I moved there, so maybe back in like 2012, 2013. Like I remember having to tell my roommates how to separate stuff. So because it's a new thing, I think people don't really understand the concept very well, which in turn makes this kind of separating job at kind of the end stage really nasty. So people apparently were chucking like dirty diapers, like I said before, unwashed food containers into their blue bags, which then attract rats who die in rot inside. So I was reading an article about it and they were saying like, yeah, we have to like open bags and take out like crushed rat carcasses and like just a bunch of gross goo of like decaying animal flesh and like, oh,
Ew.
it's so nasty. Yeah. Ugh. So people do sort through the bags to try to reduce contamination, right? And recycle as much as possible, but right? But if there's too much contamination, they can't really do anything about it. It takes only one or two contaminated bags in a load to cross contaminate the whole sorting line, is what I read in one article. So, like, if one bag in like a truckload of bags of recycling has this kind of contamination in it, then everything is contaminated.
It sort of makes you think about like, I feel like growing up, I always used to hear, it's better to recycle imperfectly than to not recycle at all. But it kind of,
Oh.
and something like I've heard discussed a lot recently within the past few years, it's actually, that's not true. It's better to recycle less perfectly than to
Mhm.
recycle more imperfectly because of situations like this where it contaminates an entire load of recyclables.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I didn't even think about like before I read that article, I like didn't even think about, animals and stuff getting in to things as well. So I mean like that's why it's so important. One of the reasons why it's so important to clean it. And I think and I've been guilty of this as well because I remember watching when I was a kid like this Magic School Bus episode about recycling, and it shows like in the recycling plant that they clean the plastic before it gets recycled. Like they
Mm.
have like a washer or whatever. So I always felt like, oh, well, I don't have to wash this very well because it's going to get washed later anyway, I thought. But yeah, but like that food like attracts insects, it attracts animals. So which can lead to further contamination. So it's really important to clean things extremely well. Or, like you were saying, if you can't clean it, then throw it in the trash.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Which is also a huge problem. Yikes.
Yeah, so Caitlin wrote this article back in 2019 before the pandemic. And so since then, I think sort of a new, I guess, trash monster, if you will,
Hmm.
has reared its ugly head. And I think we all know what we're talking about here. It's something that we
Mm.
all hopefully have been wearing every day for months now. And we generally, although hopefully don't use once and throw away, but sometimes that is the case, and that's mask, right? And so a lot of people, particularly I think in Western countries where mask is sort of this new concept, have started wearing washable masks. And a lot of people, recently are wearing washable masks, but there are still a lot of disposable masks used, and those just end up in the landfill and they're not recyclable.
Absolutely. And like most people in Asia, like I've been wearing cloth masks because I had a couple anyway, because like the air quality in like Korea is not great most of
Mm.
the time. So I had some anyway for like pollution. But I had cloth masks because like okay, number one, I'm cheap. I don't want to spend money on like disposable masks constantly. And then number two, like, I care about the environment, so I don't want to be creating that extra waste. And then, but people were telling me, like friends were telling me, and people on the subway were telling me, and even people in the media were telling just the public in general not to wear the cloth masks because they're not the what is it, K94 P9, whatever the
N94.
N94, that's the letter.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I remember hearing that too, living in
Yeah.
Korea, right? Especially with the yellow dust. I remember hearing that you sort of
Mm,
need those disposable ones, unfortunately, to fully block out the dust or the pollutants. And I don't know. I mean, I'm not a scientist, so I don't really know how true that is and how much a cloth versus a disposable mask really makes a difference. But
mhm.
it is something. I mean, it's something that I think is, like you were saying, like prevalent and sort of like this is what people are hearing, like don't use the like cloth mask, use the disposable mask. And I don't know, I don't have an answer for it. It's like
Mm.
the world gets covered in plastic or everyone catches coronavirus. I don't know.
I know it's a very delicate balance, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And but I did read a CNN article a little while ago because they were testing the efficacy of masks, and because a lot of people were wearing just like the surgical masks because they
Mm-hmm.
were cheaper than like the big heavy duty ones, and apparently the is it two or three layer surgical masks are pretty effective. They're not like N94, but they're like N89 or something. Like they're pretty effective. And even if you get like a two-layer cotton mask, now they said that the kind of fiber that you use is really important, but if you're using like a high thread count cotton, it's still pretty effective with two
Hmm.
layers. So I hope that's what I don't know. I'm still just using the cloth masks, but our coronavirus rate is like not too high, so I'm not really worried about catching it.
One thing I have seen is that a lot of cloth masks are now being built with slips so that you can put a filter inside it. And I don't know what the
Mm.
recyclability of those
Yeah, I
filters
guess.
is, but I guess it's better than sort of buying disposable mask every single day.
Yeah, the whole mask.
Hmm.
Yeah, and it's pretty interesting because I know like and I've seen on the news, I think like comparing like Western countries masks usage to Asian countries mask usage is that I do see in Western countries more people are wearing the cloth masks. And I guess that maybe that has to do with like the availability of the disposable masks because I think
Hmm.
they were until very recently not available. But we like our government, the like in Korean government took over mask production almost immediately at the beginning of the pandemic to make sure that we had enough disposable masks for everyone. So there's an abundance of them here. So most people just use the disposable mask, which like I went to a an amusement park at the beginning of the pandemic. I wasn't working. I wasn't really exposed to other people very much. And but I remember being on some of the rides and there was just masks everywhere littering the ground, like under the ride, because like while you're on the ride, the mask would get like pulled off your face. So it created like a huge amount of garbage. And it's all, and like the masks are made of plastic too. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, anyway, so it just basically compounding on the already a dire plastic problem, of course. So during the pandemic, personal protective equipment, PPE, has driven increased plastic pollution. So, in response to high PPE demand among the general public, healthcare workers and service workers, single use face mask production in China soared to 116 million per day in February, which is about 12 times the usual quantity. So the World Health Organization has requested a 40% escalation of disposable PPE production,
Mm.
right? Just in general. So I mean, obviously that's a lot of that's a lot of trash being created right there, basically.
Yeah. And so, if the global population adheres to the standard of one disposable face mask per day after lockdowns end, the pandemic could result in a monthly global consumption and waste of 129 billion face masks and 65 billion gloves. Hospitals in Wuhan, the center of the COVID-19 outbreak, produced more than 240 tons of single use plastic based medical waste, such as disposable face masks, gloves, and gowns, per day at the peak of the pandemic, 6 times more than the daily average before the pandemic occurred. And so,
Mm.
if the increase observed in Wuhan holds true elsewhere, the United States could generate an entire year's worth of medical waste in 2 months.
Yikes.
Yikes is right.
That's a horrible statistic. So much waste is also dangerous for another reason. So improper disposal of PPE could lead to the spread of COVID-19. The recommended disposal method is incineration, which would obviously release a lot of CO2. And like I was saying before, like my example of going to the amusement park, I've also seen a lot of masks like here and there on the ground as litter as they fall out of people's pockets or as like ripped off their face if they're on a ride. And even yesterday, I saw a lot of pictures of masks kind of hung around animals' necks,
Oh,
right? Because of the straps. So a lot of people too, like just like the plastic rings, right? They're saying that you need to cut it before throwing it out so it doesn't, bother wildlife as much.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so true.
Hmm.
Um, well, so I mean, we were sort of talking about how it's like between a rock and a hard place, right? Like with the
Hmm.
pandemic, like there's only so much you can do. You do need sort of these like single use PPE materials when especially working in hospitals and doctors'
Hmm.
offices. And so, what can we do, I guess, to sort of help mitigate the problem?
Mm.
And one sort of cool story that we stumbled upon is 23-year-old Kim Hanul, who has successfully made stools from polypropylene mask in South Korea as an alternative disposable recycling project, which I think is awesome.
That's really cool.
Hmm. So it takes about 1,500 masks to make a single stool, which he collected from his fellow students at the university he attends. He also received a literal ton of defective masks from a nearby mask factory. In the future, he plans to make other chairs and tables with even more masks. And by the way, don't worry, he has the mask sit for a couple days to wait for the virus to die if it's on any of the masks.
That's so cool. And, also like hearing that too, he got a ton of defective masks from a nearby mat. Like we were talking more about, people using the masks,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then disposing of them. But that's true. I mean, like any production line, there's going to be defective products. And especially with the masks, you can't let people use that product because it's literally a case of life or death. So in some cases, uh, so what do you do with them? I guess you just chuck them,
Yeah.
right? Can you imagine just like throwing out a whole ton of these plastic based masks? It's such a huge amount of waste.
Yeah. And it's like plastic wasted for no purpose, right?
Yeah.
Like they're not even doing the job of protecting against the virus because they don't get that opportunity because they were unfortunately defective.
Anyway, it's very innovative, very cool, and creative way of trying to find a way to recycle these masks. So it's really cool. So the stools are in high demand in South Korea, so it sounds like it could be a viable option. I'm personally worried about all the masks that ended up in regular trash and how it's going
Mm,
to or how long it's going to be before we start seeing masks showing up in Dead Sea animals' stomachs. So, like I said, I already
Mm.
saw that picture of it around some animals' necks and stuff. Uh, I think, and it's only been a year really since we started using the masks as well. So, like, maybe further down the line, 2 years or 3 years from now, we'll be probably seeing a lot more of it. And like I said too before, like I've been using cloth masks since the beginning, and it's worked out for me so far. And if you're using like cotton masks, high thread count, double layered with a filter, maybe like you were saying, it's a totally okay, according to a CNN study, way to protect yourself from the environment. So yeah, and like I was saying too, like there's not too many people like in Asian countries who are using cloth masks. I think I see maybe in like a normal day, an average day, I might see one or two other people, and I see like hundreds of people a day. Especially like I live in Gangnam, which is one of the most like densely populated areas, and most people wear the single-use masks.
Hmm.
So it's a really big problem.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm just sort of trying to think. I think where I am in the United States, if I were to like go to the grocery store, I think it's like 50-50 disposable versus reusable mask right now.
Okay, not bad.
But I think part of that is just that reusable masks were the quicker type of masks in terms of becoming readily available. Like the
Yeah.
disposable mask sold out so quickly. And then the ones that were available went to hospitals and medical facilities. And so for the
Mhm.
general public, it really started like people started making their own mask. You saw them like sold on like Etsy, or like friends making for friends. And then like you saw in like sort of the major stores. And now you walk into like Target and it's just like racks and racks of like fashion masks.
Yeah, the fashion mask is interesting. I saw a lady, and I think she's super cool. I did see a lady a couple times around my neighborhood here, and her mask has like sequins on it. It's very loud. I love it. It's so good. And then you sent me a really cool mask for Christmas with ovaries on it, like a
Oh,
the uterus and
absolutely.
stuff. Yeah, that one's
Everyone
really
should
cool.
have a mask with organs on it.
I love it. I think it's great. And then I was also able to order, so I don't know, my face is kind of small, so I actually even like if I buy the adult masks, like disposable ones, they don't fit me anyway. So if they don't
Mm.
fit properly, it's kind of useless to buy them. But I ordered some cloth masks from a local seller, and there you go. It's one thing that you can do to support local, entrepreneurs. And they're in kid size. So I bought a couple of like kid size cloth masks, and they're really gorgeous. Like I've got one with a paisley pattern. I have another one with like kind of forest creature patterns. I have one with like a mermaid scale pattern, and they
Mm.
and they work great. They're really good masks, and they're very comfortable to wear.
Yeah, I think it's about, everyone doing like what they can, right? Like if you
Mm,
have the ability to find like a reusable mask and like you're in a situation where like that's enough protection, like do what you can, but I don't know.
mhm.
It's such a hard situation to be in.
Oh, it's so tough. Yeah.
And especially like I think about too because I remember it must have been like over a year ago now. I did this week of was it a week or a month? I can't even remember. It was a
Mm.
period of time where a group of us just like on Facebook, we were in a Facebook group and we tried to like be zero waste basically for a
Oh,
week.
cool.
And so I remember like we had some like really interesting conversations, right? And like things came up. People were like, oh, I just realized like, I have to go buy like razor blades, but how do I do that in like a zero waste way? Or like, what do you do about deodorant? And so it was cool to sort of like have this like group as like a resource. But one conversation came up in terms of, I think it was somebody that actually works in the medical field, and they made the argument about how like yes, plastic is damaging for the environment, but it's so important in terms of sterilization and
Mm.
sterilizing and protecting like the sterilization of these like pieces of equipment. Like you think like before surgery, they're wrapped in plastic, you have to unwrap
Oh,
them.
yeah.
um
Right.
and so it's like I think about that like now, like with COVID, especially, like I feel like sterilization of equipment in a medical facility is so important. It's hard to like make the argument be like, oh, don't use plastic
Right.
because I don't know what an alternative solution would be. I don't have that answer, I guess. Maybe there are people out there that have thought about it, but I don't know. It's a weird time.
Yeah, I don't know what to do with that one, but like, what is it? Maybe just put everything in like Barbasol. You know, when you go to like the hairdressers and there's like that blue goo with that they put all their like
Mm.
hairdressing stuff in. But I don't know if that's really a good idea either.
Yeah, I don't know. If anyone listening has solutions and they're like, this is how like medical field can become, I guess, more eco-friendly, share them with us because we're not doctors. We have no clue.
Oh, zero clue. None, absolutely.
But yeah, okay. So moving right along. So let's face it, as much as we'd like to believe we can, it's impossible for everyone to recycle perfectly.
True.
And even if you do, your recyclables might be sent to a developing country where they don't have the necessary facilities to process your waste. So they'll bury it in a landfill or burn it, effectively poisoning everything in the vicinity. So, what is the solution?
So like we said, it's not it's easier said than done, but basically we have to move away from plastic together as a society. Yeah, we need to go back to using glass and paper bags for everything, or at least as much as possible, barring medical use. And of course, we need to get better at reducing and managing our waste in general. So hopefully this administration, the Biden administration, is going to take the climate crisis and garbage issues seriously and do something about it.
And doing something on a personal level is helpful as well. But what we really need is those big companies to stop
Mhm.
making so much plastic crap, right?
Yeah,
We need
totally.
federal level bans on single use plastics, incentives for going green, and like we've been saying, better waste management so that we're not shipping tons and tons of trash to developing countries for them to deal with.
Yeah, exactly. And I definitely believe, well, I definitely feel the company thing because, everyone's saying, oh, but you can do this and you can do this. And like usually the onus is put on individuals to stop using plastic or to stop, just creating waste. But the problem is what if you go to the grocery store? Like in my case, I go to the grocery store, literally every vegetable is wrapped in plastic
Mm-hmm.
and there's no way around it. Like I need to get the vegetable but I don't need the plastic, but it just so happens the vegetable is with the plastic. I can't avoid it. And that's not my fault. That's like the production company's fault.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think, for our sanity, it can be like really helpful to like do as much as we possibly can on a personal level, right? So that because otherwise you're just sitting there like banging your head against the wall because you're like, why is nothing changing? So it can be like, like on a personal level,
Mhm.
like it does help to feel like you are making a difference. But the difference that we really do need to see is on the federal and sort of national, international level with
Mm,
regulations, companies stepping up and saying, we're going to make this commitment to reducing our waste by this percentage by this year.
yeah. Hopefully now, like I honestly, like I kind of hate it, but, and I think I've said it in a blog post or something before, but the United States is sort of a world leader in a lot of those sorts of things. Like, they have like the biggest economy in the world. A lot of other countries look to America as a kind of benchmark, I guess, to base their own economies on. So hopefully, I hope now with the Biden administration, it's going to change a lot of the way that it produces
Mm,
goods. And that'll hopefully influence like a lot of other countries too to change.
yeah. And I also feel like it would be really nice. And I know it's asking politicians a lot to ask them to like maybe look at other countries that are doing it better than the United States because there are.
Mhm.
um,
Tons. Yeah,
but
so
like
many.
I think the United States needs to step back and realize there are countries that might have systems that work better than ours and look to them and learn from them because there are some like really innovative ideas happening around the world. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, I don't know. We all just need to get together and talk and learn
Yeah,
from each other.
from each other and from experts.
Yep.
And from experts. Always really important to listen to expert advice. So, anyway, thank you for listening, everyone. If you like our content, please like, subscribe, comment, and leave a review. I really feel like a mook for saying this, but it does help us out when listeners do these things, right? It helps us get out there and pop up on people's, recommended things.
Yeah, so if you like what you're listening to, a review or leaving us like a star rating on iTunes or Spotify or whatever really, really does make a difference. And we appreciate it.
Yeah, it gives us that nice little like dopamine boost. I like it.
Cool. And also we are accepting sponsorships for our podcast. If you donate $15 to Get Ovary It, we will mention you on our podcast and do a little blurb about you, whether it's just you or if you have a company you want us to shout out. And so, for example, for what this sounds like, please check out episode 5 where we talk about the charity Cool Earth.
And speaking of charities, all proceeds will be donated to Cool Earth and the Center for Reproductive Rights. So we are advertising for a good cause. You can feel good about it.
And isn't that what we all want?
It's true. We just all want to feel good.
Well, thank you again for listening. We appreciate it. If you've made it this far through the podcast, we love you. You're amazing. And see you next time.
Absolutely. Bye.
Bye.
That's it for today, folks.
Thanks so much for tuning in.
And as always, please support this work by subscribing and donating to our cause at www.teamgetoveryit.com.
Donors get access to specific content like stickers, t-shirts, and postcards from our journey.
You can donate for as little as $5 and the benefits build from there.
Go to our website for more information.
Or find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Team Get Ovary It.
Thanks for listening.
And catch us next time on Get Ovary It.